Hello, hello. I'm going to go ahead and get started with setting up. I think we're about ready to go live on Facebook here. So I'm going to get that going. So that we can start right on time today. Share in a group. Give me 1 second and we'll be ready to roll. Let's see. Here we go. All right. I think we're going live with our Zoom meeting. Yes, we are. Got it. Okay, so we're live on Facebook. We're live on Zoom. Welcome everybody to day 2 of Parenting at Home Autism Challenges. My name is Kyle Jetzel. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so we can get started. Oh, shoot. Hope I didn't mess that up. Let me see if I'm still going live. Yeah, I am still going live. Okay. This is the part that I always mess up on, right? I'm not sure how to be so great with my technical stuff. So, okay. Can everybody see my screen? Okay, I think you can. Welcome to day 2 of Autism Parenting 101, the 5-day training. My name is Kyle Jetzel. I have my Driven Autism Dad t-shirt on today. Thank you guys for showing up, and let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to talk about something that we struggle with in early on in our parenting our kids, is that everybody had ideas, everybody had strategies. They didn't particularly work for us in a lot of cases. And what I'm going to talk about today is not that this is a not one size fits all. This is a customizable program that's going to help you to create strategies for your specific situation, because every child is unique, every child is different, every situation is unique, and we need a plan unique to us. Okay, you can't just plug in what other parents have done and expect it to work for you, because we know how unique and different all of our kids are. There are all some similarities. You'll see that as we go, but you know, the old saying, if you've met one child on the autism spectrum, you've met one child on the autism spectrum. So we can't always expect the things that are working for other people to work for us. So our goal today, by the end of today, you will have learned a proven framework that will allow you to start the process of parenting your at-home autism challenges in the spirit of love. This is the first step. So this is a framework, and in the next couple of days, we are going to talk about some very specific strategies, some universal strategies that have worked for almost everyone who has tried them. But we're also going to talk about how we have to be flexible in the strategies that we create for our kids. Otherwise, we can fall into the trap of trying something and it just doesn't work and we give up. And that happens way too often for a lot of parents with kids on the spectrum. They kind of give up on trying certain things and they start to spiral down this path of nothing can be done. So we want to overcome that objection today and make sure you guys know there something can be done, it can work, and I'm going to show you how. So the agenda today, we'll do the day 2 welcome. Then we'll talk about the not one size fits all framework. And it is the framework for all at-home challenges. We'll talk about the 3 pillars of success we discovered as a family. When you create strategies, they have to really work within a certain set of parameters. And they're really, for us, there was 3 pillars that every strategy had to work within. And we'll talk about things to do today. So that's what we're going to do today. So day 2, welcome. If you have not already, go and watch day 1 and do guide 2. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you where you can find that. So if you go to Facebook here, if you're on your page and you go to your, you go to your groups. Holy moly. No, I can't get there, can I? There we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, so you go to your groups and you'll see there's my Parenting at Home Autism Challenges. Go to the guides. And if you haven't already, watch the pregame video on day 1 or pregame and the day 1 video and do the day 1 task. The good news is many of you have already done that. Rita, Sarah, Christy, Jill, Andrea, Sharon, Josie. I know Jesse too. I've got quite a few of you guys who have already completed that homework. So congratulations on that. And you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I want you to be engaged in this and I want you to start thinking through some of the thought processes that you're going to have to really make this work for you and your family. So do the homework, watch day 1, guide 2, do the homework if you haven't already. But those of you that I just alluded to, you have, that's fantastic. So let's talk about not one size fits all. We know every child is unique. We know every family is unique. We know every situation is unique. Maybe you've got one kiddo on the spectrum. Maybe it's a girl. Maybe it's a boy. Maybe you've got 2 like I do, both boys. One is more severe, level 3. One is level 2. One of my sons is an introvert. My level 3 is an introvert. My level 2 is an extrovert. So you can imagine the sibling rivalry, the conflict we had with those two of them, creating turmoil and havoc. And so we really had to get dialed into how we were going to manage those things. Now, the issue we all face, right, is because there's so much information out there. There's information overload. There's too many seminars, too many books. You can spend the rest of your life, I'm not kidding, and I've spent a ton of my life, reading books, going to autism events, going to seminars, going to trainings. And we can get into a point where we think it's the next training that's going to solve our problems, or the next book is the answer. And you could spend the rest of your life reading, going to seminars, and fill your time with that and never really get solutions. So today I'm going to talk about starting to create solutions, right? No more reading books. Now you can still read books, but they have to fit into the parameters we're going to talk about today, okay? So the framework, here's what happened to me, right? So when I first started, you guys remember yesterday I talked about being under the country and, deciding I wasn't going to leave my family, number 1. And number 2, I realized I had to change the way I did things. And so I started really looking at life through a different lens. And that lens was, what can I do, me personally, to lower stress, to feel like the greatest parent in the world, and to create a world where my kids can absolutely achieve their full potential. That's the framework I started looking through. Not how do I fix their problems? How do I make them stop these behaviors? I started looking through it like, how can I, when I was a kid, my mom one time said, you can't change anybody else. The only person you can change is you. And so that struck a chord with me, because I figured if I've got to figure out for me what I can do and what I can control as a parent. Can't always control their meltdowns, can't always control their arguing, can't always control trying to get them to eat. I can't control them, but I can control my reactions to them, right? And it wasn't long after that where I was reading, I think it's interesting when you start searching for things, and I was really searching for the answers to how to be a better parent at home and face those at-home autism challenges. I came across an article about a guy by the name of Alex Honnold. And if you're not familiar with Alex Honnold, he is what they call a free solo climber. There's actually a movie about him now called Free Solo. And what a free solo climber is he climbs mountains, he climbs cliffs with no ropes. Now, very few people do that, because if you climb mountains and cliffs with no ropes, you die. If you make one mistake, you die. Well, Alex Honnold has climbed some of the most sheer, difficult mountains, cliffs in the world with no ropes. And in an interview they had with him, they said, how can you do this? How do you? And he said, well, there's really 3 steps. He says, I'm not the greatest climber in the world. I don't have the strongest hands. I'm not the greatest tactician, which made me feel a lot like me. I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not the most patient. I'm not the kindest by nature. I'm kind of aggressive and very masculine. And so when he said that, it kind of resonated with me. You don't have to be perfect to do this. Alex Honnold's not perfect, but he says there's 3 things he does that keeps him alive, right? And those 3 things are, number 1 is get trained. Make sure you get trained on the things you need to be trained on, so that when things happen, you'll have a plan. Okay, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, right? Hope, prayer, faith, that's all good, but it's not enough. You got to have a plan, right? And Alex Honnold says to get trained. That's the first step. The second step, and we're going to talk about this tomorrow, is make one good decision at a time. What Alex Honnold does not do.
National emergency. I've been told in the last couple of hours by open source intelligence operatives that
Okay, so I've got somebody I need to mute. Here we go. Can everybody mute their, here we go. There we go. Okay. I think I've got everybody muted. So what Alex Honnold does not do is when he's looking up at this mountain is he doesn't look 100 feet above himself and say, how am I going to get there? Okay. He says, how am I going to get to my next good rock hold on the rock? Okay. He doesn't say, I want to get there. How do I get there? He says, one step at a time, right? One hold at a time. So what he does is he says, I want to make one good decision, make one good solid rock climbing decision, and then I make one more. And he says, I don't think 10 steps ahead. I don't think 20 steps ahead. I think one step at a time. We're going to talk about that tomorrow and share some strategies on how to do that. And then the third thing he says is don't freak out. Now, this is the hardest thing in the world. Let's say you're climbing and you have no ropes and you slide your hand in a rock and there's a spider in there and the spider decides to bite your fingers, which he says has happened. You can't freak out. If you freak out and you pull your hand back, you die, right? Or let's say you put your hand in a ledge to pull yourself up and there's dew from the night before and it's still wet and your hand slips. You can't freak out, okay? As parents, it's easy for us to freak out when things start to go really, really wrong. On Thursday, not tomorrow, but the day after, we're going to talk about a strategy that's going to keep us from freaking out. But today we're going to talk about getting trained, okay? And that's really what we're going to focus on today. Tomorrow, making one good decision, not looking too far ahead. And Thursday, it's don't freak out. That's the third part. So let's talk about getting trained. Now, one of the things I struggle with, we call it the next right thing. Yeah, perfect, Jill. That it's the next right thing. And if you look too far ahead, it can seem too far away, right? It just seems too far away and it seems hard to get there, right? So it's important to go one step at a time. As I started about looking into getting trained, I realized, and keep in mind, my son was diagnosed 20 years ago, okay? Almost 20 years ago, before they had hundreds of books, hundreds of pieces of training. Even still, it was hard. And it's still hard to find training that will work for you, right? How do I manage meltdowns? How do I get my son to, eat more foods or eat healthy? Or how do I overcome a high functioning son who argues a lot or is defiant? My son, Eric, is diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder, which means when I ask him to do things, he doesn't do it. He just doesn't want to at all, anything, even if it's something he wants to do. So I had to really train myself on how to get it, how I could engineer the way I manage things in a way that would allow him to overcome some of those things that he was struggling with, right? So let's talk about getting trained. And here's what I came up with, okay? As I started looking around for training, I realized there was really no training for me. But what I did realize is there was a lot of training for all kinds of different situations. And it was up to me to take those different training pieces and make them work for me, right? Instead of saying that won't work for me, say, how can I make that work for me and my child, okay? How can I make that work, okay? So I'm going to share the next screen with you. There was no training. I'd already read too many books. I didn't need more information. What I needed was to take action. We talked yesterday about being an action taker and how taking action is the next step. So today we're going to talk about the framework to getting trained, okay? And I call it the cost framework. Now, I'm going to go over this a little bit and then I'm going to show you a worksheet, and that worksheet is going to be available to you when we're done here. It's in the homework, okay? So cost stands for identify the challenge. What is the challenge and what does it cause? The O is for objective. What is the long-term objective? What is the ideal solution? What do we wish would happen or wish we as parents could? What result do we want long-term, okay? The S is strategy. We need to give our strategies a name because it makes it easier for us to remember them when we need to apply them in real-time situations. And tactics, okay? Tactics are a step-by-step action plan or recipe. What are the steps I'm going to take when my son has a meltdown or my daughter has a meltdown? Or what are the steps? Okay, we can take the emotion out of it. What are the steps I'm going to take when my son has an episode of rage, or when my son starts biting kids? Or what are the steps I'm going to take very consistently every time when my son smashes iPads, or anything and everything your kids can do? If they're more high functioning, more likely it's refuses to do homework, refuses to go to school, refuses to do certain things, right? What are the steps I'm going to take very consistently, okay? And then adjust. This is the most powerful thing I can teach. And I'm going to show you here real quick. I'm going to show you the worksheet I came up with. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. Up here, I have a C, and this is challenge. O is objective. You guys know that now. S is strategy. T is tactics. Whoops. T is tactics. Now, when we're done here, you're going to be able to print this worksheet off. You're going to have a copy of it, and you're going to create your own, okay? Now, the reason I have lines under each one of them is because you need to fill this out, okay? What is the challenge, okay? When we think about the challenge we're facing, let's say it's, and we'll cover this tomorrow, it's meltdowns every day over everything, when they don't get what they want, when they don't get the food they want, when they can't find a Lego piece, when they go to the park and they get overstimulated, when they don't get to swing when they want to swing, right? All these are meltdown. It can cause meltdowns. So the challenge is meltdowns, and I would write out all the problems and all the things it was causing. For instance, when our son had so many meltdowns when he was younger that we kind of just stopped taking him anywhere and doing anything with him because we didn't want to face those meltdowns. We didn't want him to have those meltdowns in public. Sometimes we were embarrassed. Sometimes we didn't know what to do. People were judgmental. We saw all these things, right? So meltdowns. We're going to cover tomorrow a very specific strategy for meltdowns. So you're going to love that. Okay. And we would say, what is it costing us? Okay. What is the cost for having so many meltdowns? We started losing friends. We started not going anywhere anymore. People didn't even invite us. We couldn't go out to dinner as a family. We really couldn't have, and we started walking around in eggshells in our home. I filled all this out under challenge, right? All of the reasons and all the things that were happening in our family, because I wanted to, underneath the word challenge, I wanted to make my why really, really big for solving and for addressing this problem, okay? And so I'm going to write out all the things that are happening, all the things that it's causing. We couldn't go to the movies as a family. We couldn't go to the park. He would run away. We couldn't, we really were isolated. We started getting isolated. Even our family started telling us how to solve our problems, right? You guys have been there. We've all seen that. Everybody has a solution, but nobody's living our lives, right? And so write down all the whys, and you need to get leverage against yourself so that you'll actually create these tactics, okay? The objective, our long-term objective, okay? What do we really want to have happen? Now, keep in mind, your objective can't always be, I want to stop the meltdowns, right? Maybe that's not even possible right now. But maybe if we can help them get through the meltdowns quicker, or we can address those quicker in a patient, kind, and loving way, maybe we'll shorten the length of those meltdowns, or maybe we won't be afraid to do certain things anymore. We'll talk about that. Okay, so the long-term objective. The S is for strategy, and with meltdowns, we actually named our strategy Winning Every Meltdown. I'll cover that with you tomorrow. And the tactics. We applied a series of 6 tactics, 6 steps. And, yeah, or 5. And I'll teach those to you tomorrow for winning every meltdown. But you can use this formula for almost any challenge you're facing, okay? Will you show us how to fill this form out? You know what? We'll do it tomorrow when we do the winning every meltdown. Good question, Jill. Okay. So this is the form for strategies. Now, I use this formula, challenge, objective, strategy, tactics, okay, to potty train my son, getting my kid to eat as much as possible. He still doesn't eat a lot, but he's healthy. Healthy is what really matters, okay? My level 2 son was very defiant. He'd like to argue with you a lot. So a challenge was an arguing child. The objective was to overcome that arguing, right? So really, it's just a matter of writing out your challenge. What is your long-term objective? Decide what it is. Name your strategy. And I've got some funny names for strategies, but anyway, I won't go through all of them. I think, you know what? I have my book over here. Hold on. How about that? Nothing like dead time on a live presentation. Huh? But it's interesting because this is my book. And you'll see I have all kinds of strategies in here. And I'll just show you. Okay, I've got winning every meltdown. I've got wait. These are all strategies I've created. Reframing your past. I've got power state, winning every meltdown. Nobody deserves this. Joy and giving, hot buttons and triggers, habit of happiness, hop up and hustle, bigger than your kids, anticipation, work. You see what I mean? I've got hundreds of these worksheets filled out, typed out. And then once you type them out, you start following those tactics. Okay. We talked yesterday about hope, faith, prayer. This is your plan. These tactics are what you do when that challenge occurs, and you do it every time. Now, the most important part of this is, I'm going to go back here, is adjust, adjust, adjust. Okay. So sometimes you'll create some strategies and some tactics, and they won't quite work, but you can make some minor adjustments based on your kids' reactions, because your kids will start to change. They'll start to adjust to your reactions. And then you have to adjust your strategies and write in new things, new tactics. The idea is to create a map and a plan for every challenge you face. Okay. Now, this is interesting because after my wife passed away, it's been almost 2 years now. I used this exact same worksheet. Okay. The challenge was my kids didn't have a mom. I didn't have a wife, right? That's a challenge. And there was all kinds of possible things that could go wrong. It could ruin our family. The objective was to create a happy, loving family that supported each other and be there for each other when we needed each other during those times of discouragement or fear or worry, right? The strategy, we called it, and it's just funny, and this is actually the same strategy my wife created prior to her passing. We just adjusted it for this. The strategy is called good versus evil, and it's about managing your mind. And the tactics were, and we had some tactics, right? This is the same formula we used when my wife passed away, but it's understand your challenge, understand your long-term objective, write it down, write what you want, what you wish would happen, write it down, give your strategy a name. Like, why can I remember good versus evil? Because it's a name and I know exactly what the tactics are, okay? And then as you go along, you have to adjust, okay? So let's say your child is biting, right? What's the challenge? Biting. What is the objective? You want them to stop biting. What's the strategy? What's the tactics? What are you going to do every time? Now, what this does for you is instead of freaking out, screaming at your kids, not knowing what to do, you have tactics you're going to follow every time. Now, one of the most important things you can do with this, and I'll go back here, it's not at the bottom. You know what? I think we're going to cover this in the 3 pillars. So let me just go back here. So adjust, adjust, adjust. I have strategies for my wife when she got burnt out and was exhausted too often. She created a strategy for that. When she worried too much, the kids would press her buttons. They would say, "I hate you, Mom." And it would send her down a path, and she created a strategy for managing that. Meltdowns, rage, violence, biting, kicking, screaming, smashing expensive items, all those things, and anything. Kids won't do homework. You can create strategies for, and I'll talk about a few strategies here in a second here. So let's see. Okay, next frame. So the framework in action. Let me give you a couple of examples. One of them is Ricky. When Ricky, he's my level 2 son. When he was a little boy, he was probably, I don't know, 2 or 3. One of the things we always did was go to church together, and he created this habit of screaming out in church. Now, what he would do is, we wanted them to be happy but quiet, reverent, and we were trying to teach them reverence. That was the long-term objective. What Ricky would do is we would give him, he had this model magic clay he would play with, and he had Hot Wheels and a few other colors and a few other things he liked to do in church. And sometimes he would just start talking too loud. Little kids don't understand how to whisper yet. And he would just start making too much noise. And I'd say, shh. And he would say, no. He would scream out, right? And the whole church would look at us because he would scream. And so I would stop immediately, right? I wouldn't tell him to shush anymore. Well, what I realized after a few of these times is that he was training me to not tell him to quiet down. And I wasn't going to have that, right? So I took out my worksheet. The challenge was he was screaming out in church. The objective was long-term, I wanted him to understand how to be reverent in church, right? So I came up with a strategy called shh, whisper. And the tactics were very simple for me. So the next time Ricky, if he got too loud and I said, shh, and he said, no, I would take the clay from him. I would take his Hot Wheels or his coloring book or whatever he was playing with, and I would pick him up and I would take him out into the foyer. And at the time, they had this trash can in the foyer that had a flat top on it. And, it flaps on the sides, but it was a flat top. And I would sit him on the top of the trash can and I would say, shh, whisper. Now you say it. And he would say, no. And I would say, no, shh, whisper. Now you say it. And he would say, whisper. And I would say, no, say, shh, whisper. And sometimes it would seem like forever. It's probably a minute or 2. Eventually he would say, shh, whisper. And I would say, good boy. And I would hug him real tight and I would take him back in and set him down. and give him all his items back, his coloring books or his model magic clay. And sometimes he would scream out 2 or 3 times in an hour. Sometimes it was 10 times, right? It didn't really matter. I was going to follow this process every time, right? Well, after a couple of months of doing this, he didn't seem to be getting it, right? And I'm going to go back here to, I'm going to go back one. And this is where I really had to make some adjustments, okay? I had a strategy. It was the challenge. The challenge was that he was screaming out in church. The objective was that I wanted him to learn to be reverent in church. The strategy was called shh whisper. And the tactics were what I just told you. Pick him up, take him out, set him on the trash can. Now, I didn't want to let him off the trash can because he would run around the foyer and that was a reward. I didn't want to reward him. I wanted him to quiet down and get him back in, right? And so I had to adjust. Well, after about a month of this, I remember I came back in one day and I was a little frustrated, and my wife pulled me aside and she said, I think you're missing one tactic in your strategy. And I said, what is that? She said, you're not really doing this in a spirit of love. I can tell you're getting mad. And I said, but wouldn't you? And she said, of course I would, but can you try that? Right. So the next time Ricky screamed out in church, I thought, okay, step 1, spirit of love, right? How can I do this in the spirit of love? Right. And so I would say, shh, Ricky, whisper. And he'd say, no. And I'd say, hey, come on. And I would be kind and I would pick him up, take his stuff, put it on the chair, take him outside, set him on the trash can and say, shh, whisper. And he would say, no. And I'd say, shh, whisper. And he would say, shh, whisper. And I'd say, no, whisper, shh. And when he finally whispered, I would give him a hug real tight and I would say, good boy. And I would take him in and set him back down, right? And so that adjustment to doing it in a spirit of love, I found, was tremendous in almost every strategy. If you can start every strategy by putting yourself in a state of love, right? That should be your first tactic, number 1 tactic for every strategy, whether it's meltdowns, potty training, getting your kids to eat, defiant kids, arguing kids. If you can stop what you're doing and put yourself in a state of love and say, how can I do this in a spirit of love, right? We're going to talk a little bit about that on Thursday, a really good strategy for doing that. But it changed the dynamics of how I felt when I applied this strategy. And over a period of I want to say it might have been a few years. It was way too long. But I'll never forget, after a couple of years of just applying this strategy consistently with Ricky, church started one Sunday and my wife and I were sitting there and church was over. And I looked at my wife and she looked at me and we realized he hadn't screamed out once. And I had actually asked him, shh, just whisper. And he had said it back in church. I didn't have to take him out. And you know what? He never did it again. It finally clicked for him after a couple of years, right? And it's so interesting because as he grew up, he was so reverent and people would come by and say, your kids are so reverent. How do you do it? How you're lucky. You're so lucky your kids are reverent. Remember yesterday when I talked about it wasn't luck, right? It was, I knew the challenge. I knew the objective. I knew the strategy and I followed those tactics every time, right? Interestingly enough, when Ricky turned 15, he was asked by the clergy to be a door person. And as people walked into church, he would say to them, can you guess what he would say? If they were a little too loud, he would say, shh, whisper. And they would smile at him and they would say, you're right, Ricky, shh, whisper. And they would come into the chapel reverently, right? And he got to do that for a couple of years because he was so good at it. He would smile at people, right? So sometimes you have to have a plan. You have to be persistent. You have to show patience. But the very first tactic in every strategy you create should be, I need to put myself in the spirit of love. Now, that's not easy to do when things are going horribly wrong. We're going to talk about that Thursday. I've got a very specific strategy for doing that. So we'll cover that. But I also want to share with you, not just examples of me, but from some of the families that I've worked with, okay? I worked with a family who had a little girl who wouldn't get ready for school. And she was a nightmare. And it would take them an hour to get her ready. By the time she finally got ready, she would fight with them. She would defy them. She would do everything in her power. And she was like 9. And this little girl was on the spectrum and she just was not going to get ready for school on time. By the time she finally got ready, mom would take her to school late. Mom would be out of sorts and upset. Dad would go to work late. He would be out of sorts and upset. And it would kind of ruin their whole day. Well, when I met them and I started talking to them, I said, let's do a cost worksheet, right? And we created a strategy. And this strategy is, I'm not even going to tell you the name of it because it might give away too much. But anyway, to apply to get her to get ready and get to school on time. And that was the objective. So we created a series of tactics. And I'll never forget the guy, as we finished up creating these tactics, he said to me, you know what? I'm the dad, she's the daughter, she's going to do what I say. This sounds like way too much work, and she's going to do what I say. And I said, well, let me ask you something. He said, yeah. I said, how's that working for you? He said, it's not working well at all. And I said, I know. I said, we got to try something new, right? We got to come up with a new plan, a new set of tactics. And he said, well, those tactics sound like so much work. And I said, you're already working. Think about right now what's happening. You're spending an hour fighting with her. You go to work mad. Your wife takes her to school mad. She's not happy because she's upset at you for fighting with her. And she goes to school late every day. That is a lot of work. And that is draining and exhausting and overwhelming. I said, just try this. Just try this for 1 week. Try these tactics. Remember, number one, in a spirit of love, start in a spirit of love and follow these tactics. Well, the very next day, I have a hotline for families I work with. I have an inner circle that families that want to work with me independently. And he calls me, and I get a call. It's probably 8:30 in the morning. And he leaves a voicemail message and he says, Kyle, I got to tell you, I'm on my way to work. It took about 30 minutes. We followed the steps we followed the tactics and the steps. She got ready in 30 minutes. She's happy. My wife is happy. She's taking her to school on time, and I'm going to work early. He said, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. It's less work. And he says, and I feel great. He says, we're going to have to work anyway. Why not come up with a plan that gets us the objective and gets us the results we want, and do it in a spirit of love? We feel better. We're not so exhausted. So many of us as parents are fighting with these kids all day long, and we're stressed out and we're overwhelmed, and there's tremendous stress. And at the end of the day, we're so exhausted. We think, I can't do this anymore, right? We're overwhelmed. But if we apply a plan and we do it in a spirit of love, and we stay with it and we're consistent, just like Ricky at church, it took me years before it finally set in with him. But I was doing it in a spirit of love. After I learned from my wife, I was doing it in a spirit of love, and I was okay with it, right? I was doing it for the right reasons, and he got it. And when he got it, now people think he's the most wonderful kid ever at church. They have no idea the pain and suffering I went through. And really, I didn't go through pain and suffering. I didn't fight him. I just had some steps I used, and they eventually worked, right? So we have to be willing to write steps out, create tactics, and then make adjustments as we go, okay? Another one, and this is from a more recent family I've worked with, 2 kids on the spectrum, 1 girl, 1 boy, and sibling rivalry is bad. And so we sat down and we used our cost formula. What's the challenge of sibling rivalry? What's the long-term objective to get them to get along better, right? And then what are we going to call the strategies? A lot of times I'll do the tactics first, because then I can make a crazy name for it, like sibling rivalry strategy. That's a good one, right? And we came up with a set of tactics that we could use as parents, that we could apply every time they start arguing or fighting or getting into it with each other. You just apply the tactics and you start in the spirit of love, right? And you go and address things in a spirit of love. It keeps you calmer. They are naturally calmed by your calmness, and it just really makes the whole situation better. So that's a couple of examples. Again, you have unique needs, right? Tomorrow I'm going to be covering winning every meltdown. So if your kids have meltdowns, you're going to want to be here tomorrow, because I'm going to cover a very specific strategy and a set of tactics. Again, you may need to adjust. That's okay. But at least you got a plan the very next time your child has a meltdown, right? So the 3 pillars of success. Here's what's interesting. As we started to create these strategies, we realized they all kind of fell inside, they compartmentalized inside a couple of things. The pillar number 1 is this. When you create these strategies, we'll always do what's best long-term for our kids on the autism spectrum, even if it's hard. Now, that means sometimes we need to commit, like I did with Ricky, to pick him up, take him out, set him on the trash can every Sunday, whether it was 1 time or 5 times or 10 times in an hour. I was going to do that, but I knew it was best for him long-term, even if it's hard. And it was hard. But you know what? Once he figured it out, I'm done. I didn't fight him. I just applied the tactics, okay? Pillar 2, we'll always do what's best for our family. long-term, even if it's hard. Now, these two can kind of, when you have 6 kids like I do, sometimes those can battle against each other. So we have to be kind of creative in how we design our tactics. They have to be good for our kiddos on the spectrum and for our typical kids, okay? One of the worst things we can do is prioritize our kids on the spectrum, and our typical kids can get resentful. We need to make sure that we're creating strategies and tactics for both groups, okay? Not just our kids on the spectrum. We need to have strategies and tactics to show love, to show kindness, to show compassion to our typical kids as well. And here's what's really cool. When you start doing things in a spirit of love for your kids on the spectrum, you will find naturally you start doing that for your typical kids, okay? None of this, you should know better, you're older, none of that, okay? When you work with your typical kids, when you have difficulties with them, you use the same process. How can I do this in the spirit of love? And then create those tactics, okay? That's the way we do it, okay? And pillar number 3, and this is the most important, we'll always do things in the spirit of love, especially when it's really hard, okay? Every tactic, every strategy, every tactic should start with, how can I do this in the spirit of love? Again, we're going to talk about Thursday, how when things start to go crazy, we tend to lose our minds. I'm going to teach you a strategy that's going to help you put yourself in, somebody said it the other day, when they're at their worst is when they need us at our best. But it's the hardest thing in the world to do. I'm going to teach you how to do that Thursday with a very specific strategy. So make sure you come back on Thursday for that. So the 3 pillars of success: we'll always do what's best long-term for our sons on the autism spectrum, even if it's hard. Pillar 2, we'll always do what's best long-term for our family, even if it's hard. And pillar 3, we'll always do things in a spirit of love, especially when it's really hard, right? So write out the challenge, write out your long-term objectives, okay? Write out the tactics, the steps you'll take every time this happens. When we start to give our kids consistency, they start to realize, right? It's easy for us to, and again, it's easy for us to not be consistent. It confuses our kids. The last thing we want to do is confuse our kids, right? But when we're consistent with our tactics, when we do the same things every time, and when we do them in a spirit of love, they feel that, okay? They feel that love because we're calm, we're cool, we're collected, we're applying those tactics. Here's the best thing about this, and we talked about this in our Q&A yesterday after everything was over. You know, one of the problems we can have as parents of kids on the spectrum is we don't want to discipline autism, but we do want to discipline bad behavior. But sometimes we don't know which is which, okay? And so what ends up happening is we kind of tend to default to not disciplining, even when it's bad behavior, okay? When your kid does something, when your kid has a meltdown because they don't get what they want, that can be bad behavior, okay? But if we give in, then we're walking around on eggshells because we have to give everything they want. And if they don't get what they want, they scream and yell and throw a fit. That's not autism. That's a learned thing because they realize if I go crazy, I get what I want, right? The cool thing about this is if you create a strategy and tactics in the spirit of love, it doesn't matter whether it's bad behavior or autism, okay? If your child has a meltdown in public and it's because of lights flashing in the movie theater and you have a strategy for winning every meltdown, you can apply it. If you go to the park and your child doesn't get to swing when he wants to because some other kids are on the swing, that's bad behavior. I'm afraid it's a bad behavior, but you can still use the same strategies and tactics in a spirit of love, okay? Then what we're doing is we're teaching discipline in a spirit of love. And we all know, right? Kids don't respond to discipline. They respond to discipline when it's done in a spirit of love. When they feel love, they'll respond differently than they will if we just discipline them in anger or frustration, okay? Then they feel like they're being attacked. And a child that feels attacked is going to be problems down the road, okay? So those are the 3 pillars. That is the framework. Tomorrow, okay, that's all I want to cover with you today. We're finishing a little bit early, but I'm kind of excited about that because I want to do a lot more Q&A. But tomorrow, we're going to talk about step 2 of the framework, making one good decision. Remember, the mountain climber, he doesn't look at the top from the bottom. He looks at the very first next step, okay? And as parents with kids on the spectrum, we can't look too far ahead. We got to look at the next step. Tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I am going to share with you tomorrow a strategy. It's in this book right here for winning every meltdown in a series of tactics and steps. There it is right there. I'm going to flash it. I'm not going to let you see it. Flash it. We're going to cover that tomorrow in detail. So if one of your issues is your kids have meltdowns, I'm going to show you the strategy that changed our family. It changed our lives because Once we learned this strategy and started applying the tactics, my wife and I could take our kids anywhere. We could go anywhere. We were getting invited again. We started getting friends again because we knew what to do every time when our son had a meltdown, whether it was bad behavior or whether it was overstimulation. It didn't really matter. We were going to apply the winning every meltdown strategy that I'm going to teach you tomorrow. So step 2 of the framework, make one good decision. And I'm going to teach you the strategy that dramatically transformed our family forever. So what to do today? Okay, I'm going to go back to Facebook and I'm going to go back to my homepage so I can walk you through that. So this is my homepage, Kyle Jetzel. Okay, you want to go to the Parenting at Home in a Spirit of Love group. Once you're there, go to guides. And then you're going to go down to day 2. Not one size fits all, the framework for family success. Click on the link. You will see day 2 homework after you've watched day 2, and I'll post this video. What's one of your biggest at-home autism challenges? How do you feel? How would it feel if you could solve it forever? And the worksheet I showed you right here, that worksheet right there is this click. Okay, so I want you to print this off and start thinking about some of the challenges you face. Go ahead and write on there. What's the challenge? Lay it all out. What is it causing? Maybe you're exhausted. Maybe your child feels like they're bullied. Anything, any challenge can be overcome if we do the work right and write this stuff down. So do that. Okay. And if you will do that, I will give you rewards. We talked about this yesterday. Laugh with Me ebook, lessons learned ebook, energy hacks video and worksheet, as well as the Autism Dads training video. Now this, I'm going to talk a little bit about this today, at 17 ebook. So when my oldest son, he's typical boy. When he was 17, I was speaking at an autism conference. This is more than 10 years ago. And he was invited to speak with me. I've spoken at a lot of autism conferences on, parenting in a spirit of love and teaching your child's regulation, how to regulate their emotions, how to manage their emotions, regulate themselves when they start to feel like they're getting overwhelmed. And I got invited to speak. And when they found out I had a 17-year-old typical son, they said, hey, can your typical son talk about his experiences too for about 10 to 15 minutes? Well, this made me real nervous because I didn't know what he was going to say. And I said, hey, you want me to help you write your presentation? He was like, no, I got it. I'm like, oh my gosh, is he going to get up there and talk about how we pay no attention to him and he's a secondary thought in our family because I spend so much time focused on my kids on the spectrum? And I was really nervous until he got up and started talking. And basically what he covered was something he called the 4 A's of making sure your typical kids feel loved and cared for. And it was fantastic. It was so good. I'm so lucky I recorded it because I went back and he wrote it up. And that's what the At 17 ebook is. How can you ensure your typical kids get the love and attention and grow in love and respect and values their siblings on the autism spectrum? Alec, our oldest son, shares insight on what you can do today as a parent to equip not just your kids on the spectrum for success, but to give every single one of your kids and your spouse the opportunity to achieve their full potential. When there's love in your home, I talked about it Saturday night, all my kids were over here. The whole family, my kids that are married and moved away, they were back in the house. We were having a great time. They were tickling their more severe brother on the spectrum who doesn't like to be touched. Somehow or another, they know how to have fun with him. And it's just joyous. And it's what we all want. We all want a family who wants to be together, who loves each other. Not one of these, what do they call it, dysfunctional. When they get together, they fight and they're angry. And that's no fun, right? And they say they love each other, but they don't act like it. I'll be honest with you, my family loves each other. They act like it. If you hang around as people, recently we all went to the mall together. There's 6 kids plus me. We're all walking through the mall together, and one of my son's friends walks up and he looks and sees us all and he says, it's just beautiful. Every time I see you guys together, your whole family's smiling and happy. And it was touching for me to see that other people notice that, right? So you can get all that if you do the homework. By the way, you guys are doing great on the homework, plus a free coaching session with me. So what to do today? Go back to Guide 3, Day 2 homework. Let me show you where it's at again. Go to the Facebook group. Go to Guides. Go down to Day 2 and click on the tasks. Day 2 homework, complete those tasks. and you will be eligible for those rewards. So that is what I have today. Tomorrow, we're going to cover, you'll know why most strategies don't work for you long-term. We've all tried something and given up. It might have worked had you stayed with it, right? But we don't know, right? And so we give up. We just give up because it doesn't work. We give up. That won't work. My child is unique. My child is different. And we give up, and then we're stuck. We don't know what else to try, right? It's hard to be trained when you don't have a plan, right? Hope, faith, prayer, and a plan. We're going to talk about why some of those plans fail and what we can do about it. Plus, we're going to talk about winning every meltdown, a strategy that can change your life if you'll apply it. Plus, I'm going to share with you some really interesting things about what my wife said about kids in general and how to help our kids change their patterns. When we start to change our patterns, they start to change their patterns, but sometimes it doesn't come without some pain. And so I want to let you know that ahead of time. Sometimes things will get a little worse before they get better, because change is not easy for those kids either, especially those kids. It's not easy for us, but when we try to get those kids who are used to these really tight regulations to change, it can be difficult. So sometimes it'll get a little worse before it gets better. And I want to prepare you for that. Again, this is not easy stuff. It's going to take work, but you're already working like crazy. I just want you to work like crazy doing the right stuff. So we're going to do that tomorrow. And that's all I have. So the Q&A. So those of you that joined us on Facebook, thank you so much for joining us on Facebook. I sure appreciate it. And I'm going to let go of you, and I'm going to spend my time now with those of you that are on the Zoom call. So hold on one second. Stop the live stream. Okay, I have stopped the Facebook live stream, and I'm going to open up the chat. In the spirit of love, good point. My son doesn't like shush either. Of course, no kids like that. No kids like to be shushed. I don't like to be shushed, right? But we do need to teach them that there's a time and a place for everything. And it doesn't matter if they're on the spectrum or not, right? The world, we need to teach our kids to be as functional as they can be in the real world. And that means we need to help them understand there are parameters that are going to help them better function in this world if they learn how to do those things. So I see Jill, I'm going to ask you guys to unmute, and I see Andrea's unmuted already. And Jill, do you guys have any questions for me? Let's talk about that, about what we talked about today.
I have a question.
Okay.
This is Jill.
Hey, Jill.
I'll share my I'll start. Okay. Hi. All right. So I do have a question. First of all, I have an appointment tomorrow at 3 o'clock. So I'm going to miss the class, but I'll follow along later. But as we're going along with what you were talking about today, I have found a lot of times that there are some things that are easier to teach than others, because the reward for my son is more than the challenge, let's say. So for instance, like if he hates to get his blood drawn, but explain to him that it's important that we keep up with our health, and that's part of what we do. We get our blood checked to make sure that we're healthy. So I usually offer him a pretty like a blizzard treat at Dairy Queen to go do that. But as he's getting older, I'd like to see him start taking that on himself, to take responsibility for making a decision that's good for his health. And I don't know what the next step is to move him past. Mom kind of urges me, and I get mad, and then we go, and then I get a dessert, and then we're done. And then, it's like rinse and repeat the next time.
Yeah. So one of the things I had to do with my son, and just so you'll know, one of my sons has a higher level of understanding. And so one of my sons has no idea about rewards or, consequences. He just can't seem to grasp those things. So for me, a lot of times I would create if-thens for myself. Okay. I call it contracts. My wife and I used to write contracts for ourselves, right? And we would say, here's what's going to happen. Here's going to be the end result every single time, right? When you create a strategy, you want to be consistent with it. Now, for your son, if he does have a level of understanding, which my other son, Ricky, does, I would write contracts with him. So I would write it out and I would say, hey, we draw blood. This is how often we do it. if you'll go without any arguments or trouble, I'll get you this blizzard and this, right? And I would let him read it and he would look through it. We figure out together, and he can even help me create consequences or rewards, right? And then he signs it and I sign it. And the next time it comes up for blood, I say, hey, Ricky, check out the contract. It's about that time. And he'd be like, right. Now he helped me write the contract. Now, my other son doesn't understand contracts, but I still write them for him, but they're more about me doing what I say I'm going to do. I'm not writing a contract for him because he'll never sign it. He can't understand it. The contract is for me because I need to hold myself accountable to some specific steps, right? So sometimes with kids that have a little bit more understanding, you can reason with them if you can reason with them. And the best time to do that is right when you're done and he's eating his blizzard. And say, you know what, every time we do this, we kind of go through this. And he's like, I know, I'm sorry. Because they'll say that, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And you say, you know what, how about we do this next time? Let's write something up and let's do more than a blizzard. Let's do blizzard and fries, but no fight at the beginning. Okay. And maybe we write it out. And I don't know, you're going to have to be creative, Jill. This is your son. You know better than me. Okay. But if you start by saying, you know, the best time to make a change is when at the end, when they're apologetic, they've made a mistake. They don't want to make mistakes. They're not doing this on purpose. They don't want to be bad kids, right? Mm-hmm. They want, but they're afraid or scared, or who knows what's going on sometimes. But if we set them up and give them that path and say, hey, remember blood work? Here's our contract. This time, if you go and we go without any arguments and you just get ready and we don't have any problems, you get this and this. But if not, you know, we still get the blizzard, right? You got to be creative in how you approach those things. So that's one option for you, right? Again, this doesn't come from me making stuff up. I've done this. Okay. I have two sons. One is more severe. He doesn't even understand contracts. But again, I don't write them for him. I write them for me and my wife, so that we would be very consistent in the way we managed it and what he was rewarded or the consequences he had to face. Right. Right. Because what happens is if you say, hey, if you'll do this, I'll do this, and then you don't, we've confused them even more. Okay. Right. Or if you say, or if you give in and give them if you say, hey, if you don't fight with me, I'll get you a blizzard. And then he fights with you and then you go and you still get him a blizzard. Kids do what works. Why would he not fight you? That makes no sense to me. Right. I'm going to fight you because I'm still getting a blizzard. So we got to figure out a way to be creative in how we do it. And then, you know, write those contracts, stick to those contracts. By the way, just so you'll know, I had one mom whose son would find the contracts and tear them up. Right. So make a copy. And she would say, remember the contract? And he would rip it apart. And she would say, the contract is still valid. I still have a copy. Right. So let's do this. But she was patient and kind with it. Okay. And by the way, we ended up writing a strategy for ripping up contracts for her. Okay. The next time you rip up a contract, here's what mom's going to do. Here's what's going to happen. Now, we don't want to do this. So if you rip up a contract, here's the consequences. Here's the rewards. We don't want to do that. We want to always give you rewards. We want to pour out rewards upon you. You're the one that decides. You get the consequences, right? Not me. It's you. And so what that does is it gives them more control too, because our kids crave control. So hopefully that's helpful. Anybody else?
Very much. Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else got any questions? I can see you itching, Andrea. What you got?
Yeah. So basically, my son has recently learned to mask at school. So he's coming home a lot, and it's sort of that pop bottle effect. So he is absolutely melting down over really small things. I'm just not sure if the cost framework is going to be effective.
So let me tell you what's happening. Let me tell you what's happening. This is a myth for a lot of parents. Okay. Here's what they like to believe. My kids go to school and act right. They're not really acting right. They're pretending to act right all day long at school. Then they come crazy. Okay. Yeah. Complete myth. I don't care if it's a professional telling you this crap. If he can act right at school, guess what? Kids do what works. You know what's happening at school? He's acting right because it's working for him. Then he comes home and he does whatever the crap he wants to because it works. He's manipulating you. Now, he's not a bad kid. Kids do what works. Okay, I hate this masking crap. I got to be honest with you. If you can do it for an hour at school, you can do it for an hour at home. Don't tell me you're pretending to be good at school. No, you're being good at school. You know why he's not being bad at school? Because there are consequences and there are rewards and they're consistent, right? They're not his parent. So they're creating parameters, right? He comes home and your parameters are everywhere. So he does what works. I want what I want. I want it now, Mom. I masked at school. Baloney. He acted right because there were parameters he had to fit in. He comes home and now there's no parameters. You don't give him the same consistency and the same parameters. So he does whatever the crap he wants. Now, I'll fight with a professional about this because I've raised two of these and I've worked with a lot of families now. And your job is to start creating parameters. And when he comes home and he acts, whatever he does is say, no, you don't get to do that here. That's not how we act. Listen, I love you, but that is not acceptable. And here's what we're going to do.
So is it kind of about setting really firm boundaries?
You've got to set up boundaries. You got to be consistent. This is why you write contracts with yourself. If he does X, I'm going to do Y every time. Now, you know what will happen when you do Y every time? He will create his own boundaries. He'll say, you know what? That didn't work. Now, remember, he'll try something else. He'll ramp it up because kids like to, I'm going to talk about this tomorrow. They're going to ramp up. You know what? I told Mom, I screamed at her and that doesn't work anymore. So now I'm going to hit her because that's the next step, right? And then I'm going to hit myself because I want what I want and I can't get it through screaming or hitting. So I'm going to hit myself. Does that get me what I want? Now, let's be clear here. Some kids have self-harm issues because they're severe. Okay. But if you can mask at school, those kids that have severe problems at school have severe problems at home. There's a difference, right? Masking is a professional's way of saying, it's okay. I don't buy masking, right?
Can you explain if you're saying that masking doesn't exist essentially, why am I finding that we have these problems after school, but not on the weekend?
Not on the weekend?
No, on the weekend he's like a perfect angel.
Because he doesn't
everything works perfectly, but after school, it's crazy.
He doesn't like school. I didn't like school either. Did you like school? I don't like school. I never liked school. There's a lot of things in this world I don't like that I do. Okay. And when he gets home from school, he didn't like school. He's mad about it. I don't like school. They make me do stuff. I have to write. I have to listen. I have to sit still. Right? Let him run, let him play, let him be a kid, throw him in the backyard with a jungle gym, let him go crazy in the backyard, right? Our job isn't to rein him in. Our job is to let him be kids and let him have fun and let him do these things, right? He's got a lot of energy. He wants to do stuff. He wants to be a kid. Let him be a kid, right? What may be happening is you're like, can I go outside? No, stay inside. Send his butt outside. Put him, right? Do what you need to do to let him get that energy out because he's got energy and he doesn't like going to school. On the weekends, he doesn't have to go to school. He doesn't have to put these clothes on that itch him. He doesn't have to sit there quietly for a teacher. He doesn't have to write. I didn't like it either. So when I got home, I was upset too. He's not happy at school. I wasn't either. He just doesn't know how to express it right. Give him some outlets.
You know what? That makes a lot of sense because today at school they went on a walk just in the local area. It was part of a field trip. Didn't really understand. But he came home and he was a lot better.
Really?
So I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, he had a little exercise. He had a little fun at school and then he came home okay. Interesting. Yeah. So he masked. See, we got to quit giving our kids excuses for bad behavior. Okay. Autism is autism. Sometimes they do get overstimulated. Sometimes things happen that tip them into meltdowns. Okay. But we also got to realize if we give them parameter, and it's hard as a parent, right? You want to be loving and kind, but you can be loving and kind and still give them parameters, right? Now they're going to fight back because they know it's worked in the past. We just have to be very consistent and say, hey, that's not going to work. Please don't do that. It's not going to work. It's not going to, you know what gets you what you want? Talking sweet to me. You want some, you want an extra helping of ice cream? Sweet talk me and watch what happens. Screaming at me is not going to get you more ice cream. Hit me ain't going to get you more ice cream, right? There's a lot of ways to get what you want. We got to give them those opportunities, right? And so, yeah, if they have sensory needs, let's meet them. The last thing I want when I pick up my kid from school is to bring him home and stick him in the house. Man, I don't care what the weather's like. It's hard, but I'm going to take him over to the park, right? I might even stop on the way home and let him run like a banshee for 20 minutes at the park, right? It's hard to do, but I'm going to do what's best for him, even if it's hard, right? Then he gets that energy out, a lot of those kind of things. So hopefully that's helped. Anybody else have any questions? I see a few of you that have popped open. How are you guys feeling about what's going on so far? Christy, did you have a question?
I do. You were talking about giving him like rewards with the contracts. Our frustration is if he has a reward, he has agreed on the reward. When it comes time for the reward and we give him the reward, it's never enough.
Yeah. So here's what you got to do. Be very clear in your reward. I'm going to give you 2 pieces of candy. Okay. You got to be so tight and distinct on everything, right? Because kids, I'll talk about this tomorrow. Kids find loopholes, right? You said I could have some chips, not a whole bag. Well, that's not what you said. You said I could have some chips, but not a whole bag. But that's not what you said, right? You're wrong, Mom. You said chips. I thought a whole bag. You got to tell me a bowl, right? Our kids find loopholes in everything we do.
He's very literal.
Exactly. My son is too, right? So if I have to tell him, hey, we're going to go do this, we're going to do this, you're going to get this, this, and this, very specific. Okay. Now, if he does want more, give him an opportunity to earn more, right? Maybe he goes and cleans his room, or maybe he does want more. Yeah. In the contract, it says we're going to do this, but check this out. Your room is kind of messy. Go pick up all your clothes, throw them in the hamper, and I'll give you another scoop. Whatever it is, right? The idea is to be very clear on those. And then you've got to stick to them, right? Because if you don't stick to them, somebody's making a little noise back there. If you don't stick to your rewards and consequences, then they also realize, oh, they're not consistent. I can really manipulate this situation. Again, their kids aren't being bad. They're being kids. Their job is to figure out what works and what doesn't work in this world. And you do it too, by the way, Christy. You too, Andrea. All of us do this. We do what works. When it stops working, you know what we do? Something else. Okay. And when that stops working, you know what we do? Something else. Okay. So we got to create very specific, reasons for our kids to be nice to us, to get what they want, or to be kind and get what they want, or to regulate their emotions and get what they want, right? So we're going to do things. And again, they're not being bad. They're being human. They're going to do what works. Okay. If they lose a Lego piece and they scream like crazy and the whole house starts searching for this Lego piece, guess what they learn? Oh, I lost a Lego piece. I went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Everybody helped me. Right? They learn, right? So when my son would lose a Lego piece, he couldn't even tell me what he lost. So we wouldn't do anything until I said, I need to understand, draw. We got to where he was nonverbal for the first 5 years of his life. He would draw things, and then sometimes he would spend so much time drawing what he needed. By the time he forgot what he needed, and he would calm down, right? And I would say, draw it. I need to know what it is. We're not going to look. We don't know what you need. You got to tell me. You got to write it. And I would ask him, is it this? No. Is it this? No. Is it this? No. Is it this? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So now can you ask nicely? Can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? You see, I ask a lot of questions. This is one of my strategies too. I never tell my son what to do ever. Everything I do is a question, because my son is literal. If I say, hey, let's go get ice cream, and I say it kindly, You know what he hears? Let's go get ice cream, because he hears it literally. It's a command. And if it's a command, he ain't doing it. He has ODD, oppositional defiance disorder. Hey, Eric, let's go get ice cream. No, right? He loves ice cream. That's the craziest thing in the world. I realized I had to ask questions. So I would say, do you want to go get ice cream? And then he's in control. He's like, yes, right? Or I'd say, do you want to go get ice cream now? No. How about 5 minutes? How about 10 minutes? How about tomorrow? What kind do you want? You hear all these questions, gives him so much control. He wants control. He thinks we have control. We don't have any control, but he thinks we do. So he wants it. He's going to get it. And that means if you tell him what to do, he ain't doing it. But if you ask him questions, you can lead him to where you need him to go, right? And there's a very specific strategy I created that for my son. I found out that you'll find this interesting. Typical kids are commanded what to do 50 times a day by their parents, okay? And I thought, that sounds wrong to me. So I started counting one morning. And before my son even left for school, I had made 37 commands before he even left for school, right? I thought, I gotta stop. You guys do it too. Get your clothes on, you get ready. We gotta eat breakfast. All those are commands, and they hear, you're just telling them what to do and they have zero control. But if you say, are you ready? What are you gonna wear? What are you gonna wear today? Are you ready for school? Are you ready to eat breakfast? What do you want to eat? We got 3 options. Would you rather eat this or this or this? Hey, can we put our stuff in our backpack? What are you going to put in there? What kind of lunch do you want? My kid had so many options. By the time it was time to go to school, he was ready because he had made 100 choices that were all his, right? So that's a little tip, and that's a different strategy, but the idea is to give them choices in everything. Okay, eventually you get them where you want them to go, but quit telling them what to do. Ask them. They'll do it.
So is it like by giving them those choices, you're kind of giving them autonomy, you're giving them control over what you can without
Right.
losing the focus of what needs to happen, like getting them to school one time?
Right. For instance, but you also got to remember, not everything matters. Okay. I mean, those of you that are control freaks, you got to get over that crap. You're going to be disappointed the rest of your life. Okay. You want him to make up his bed every morning? I say, forget that crap. Does he know how to make it? Yes. Perfect. Okay. Now, I don't make my kids make their bed every morning. It's busy work. Okay. I'll shut their doors. Okay. I don't want to see it. Now, does he have to brush his teeth? Yes. Does he have to go to school? Yes. Does he have to bathe? These are all have tos in this world. Okay. So those are the ones I ask him questions. Are you ready? Hey, you ready to hop in the shower? How about now? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes? What toys are you going to take with you? Are you going to do a shower or a bath? I'm asking so many questions that he gets to choose that eventually he chooses to take a bath, even though he doesn't like it, or a shower, right? Whatever it is. Now, my son now will take showers on his own. For 10 years, I fought him. And by fought, I mean, asked him questions every night. Are you ready now? How about 5 minutes? How does it feel when you take a shower and you go to bed? Does it feel good? Perfect. You ready to take a shower? Let's do it, right? So anyway, those are a couple of things. We're gonna talk more tomorrow. We're gonna go ahead and end it because I think we're 8 minutes late. But thank you for the questions. You guys can, obviously by listening, you can tell I've been through this stuff, and I have a book full of strategies with names that I can call upon at any minute because of what I'm teaching you this week. Pull out that worksheet. Stop asking me, how do I use the worksheet? Fill it out, however you fill it out. Write the challenge, write the objective, write the strategy, write the tactics. Okay? Do that and start doing it, and you'll adjust. You'll figure some things out, right? The key here is we're never going to give up anyway. Let's just start doing it and start writing stuff out, start figuring it out, create tactics, create steps, follow those steps. When they don't work perfectly, make adjustments. Okay? But you're going to have to work anyway. You might as well do some stuff that's going to get you good results. Now, again, my son yesterday, you guys saw him. He left and he went to the village. And 15 minutes after I got off the call with you guys, I got a call from the police. The Boise police called me. I live in Boise, Idaho. And they said, hey, this is the Boise Police Department. I have your son with me. And my heart dropped, right? I said, is everything okay? And he said, yeah, it's okay. But I have Eric here. And I said, well, let me describe Eric and tell you what's going on. And I kind of gave him some background. He said, oh, that makes a lot more sense. And so I had a conversation with the police officer. I said, what was he doing? And we talked about, he wasn't doing anything bad. He had just gotten overstimulated and gotten a little aggravated, but he was in the corner regulating himself, trying to manage his emotions. And a security guard saw him and thought he was really mad, and he was. So they called the police. And when the police showed up, he had already started to calm himself, and they started talking to him, and he doesn't talk very well, but he was able to give him my number. And what ended up happening is I talked to the police officer and I said, thank you so much for taking care of him. I could tell he was a great guy. I said, would you take a selfie with my son and send it to me? And so now I got a picture of my son with the police officer that helped him out. He was able to come home just fine. Everything went okay, but only because I have created strategies and tactics for helping him manage his emotions, regulate himself when he gets overstimulated. All those things matter. And now he can be out in public. He can handle himself instead of getting arrested and thrown in jail, right? And so now I've got all these people out there I feel like helping me. The police out there, people at Blaze Pizza know him. The people at McDonald's know him. All these people help me because I've helped him to start to understand how to manage himself, right? And that's because, again, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm being mean when I say we've got to set parameters. That's not the point at all. I do them in a spirit of love, right? It's all about love for these kids, because if we'll do that, they can function in this world, right?
That's what I love about this so far, is like everything you have said, everything's coming from that spirit of love. Everything is being done with love because we want the best for our kids. And I think so often professionals say, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And there's no love there. It's just a set of things, guidance that you need to do because it will work, and it doesn't always work. And I think the great thing about what I've learned so far over these 2 days so far is that if you do it with the spirit of love, coming from that spirit of love, you get further with it because you're patient, you're kind, you're not doing it, going, you must do this, and getting cross about it. And it just seems to flow.
Right. And by the way, when you do things in a spirit of love, you feel good about your efforts. You're not exhausted. If your kid has a meltdown and you handle it in a spirit of love, you feel good. You're not exhausted. If you don't, and you get cross or you get angry or get mad at other people for staring, you're exhausted. You're overwhelmed, right? And your kid is watching that. Don't think they're not watching how you handle you and learning, okay? They do. They absolutely do. So when I was a kid, I heard one time somebody say, when you lead people with kindness and patience and love, they feel empowered, right? But when you lead people with fear and with command and with harsh discipline, they feel controlled and they want to escape, okay? And so we've got to be really careful that we don't use fear or demand or harsh consequences because that's going to make them feel like you're controlling them, and they're going to want to get away from you. They're going to want to escape. They're going to fight back, which is natural, not just our kids, everybody, right? Nobody wants to be controlled. And when you try to control people, they fight back, right? But you can lead in a spirit of kindness and love and patience. And everything I'm teaching you starts with spirit of love. How can I handle this meltdown? How can I handle my son biting other kids in a spirit of love? How can I handle him coming home after being bullied in a spirit of love, right? When you work with other people, you do it in a spirit of love. They're like, oh, wow, I can do that. Right? I'll share with you tomorrow something my wife did in an IEP that made my child their favorite, even though he wasn't. Okay. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. I'm going to let you guys go and join us tomorrow. Same time, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.